So, now let me just give you a little bio on Senator Montford. He's elected to his position, I believe, in 2010. Is that correct, Bill? Prior to that, he was elected to the Leon County School Superintendent's job. He was a Leon County Commissioner. He was a principal at Lincoln and Godby High School. He was an assistant principal. He was a math teacher. And Bill has a bachelor's and a master's degree from Florida State University and an AA degree from Chipola. So he's one of our junior college folks that transitioned over to FSU. So Bill Montford will be term limited out in 2020. A lot of people are wondering what he's going to be doing. But I heard by the grapevine, very serious source, that he's going to be moving back to his hometown in Bluntstown and running for mayor. So keep that in mind. So Commissioner Senator Montford, thanks for coming, Bill. We're delighted to have you.
Thank you. You know, the truth is, I've always wanted to be a mayor, and I'm already honorary mayor of Bluntstown and Bristol and Two Egg and a whole bunch of other places. But thank you for inviting me today. You all know why I'm here, because the other speaker wouldn't show up. He called back to Washington up there, so you know, I'm easy. So Rocky called me, and I said, yeah, I'd love to do that. And I said, but you know, we'll try to, you know, make sure to change the schedule a little bit. And we did. I'm here. I'm glad to be here. How much time do I have?
You have about
3 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes.
30 minutes.
Somebody said 3:30.
And we'll take questions after that.
And questions. Okay. I'm going to skim across the top of several things and save as much time as I can for questions. But for your grandson and Zach, though, I think we just need to pause for a moment and say how grateful we are for them, for their service, and to live in the country that we live in. And I know sometimes I'm just as guilty as everybody else. I don't pause long enough to be thankful for living in the country that we live in. It's because people have sacrificed to ensure that we can do that. Zach, it's good to have you back. I still remember you and going up down the steps of the baseball game, FSU, selling bags of peanuts. Remember that? And then your daddy would take half the profits. I remember that too. Okay, let's get down to business. This is I entered my 9th session. It really seems like I just got started. But it's been a pleasure to serve in the Senate, and it's been an honor for you to have allowed me to represent you. I do have 11 counties. I have the largest Senate district in the state, 2 time zones, about 200 miles from one end to the other. I've got Taylor, Hamilton, Jefferson, Madison, Leon, Wakulla, Franklin, Gulf, Calhoun, Liberty, and Gaston. Is that right, Taylor? Taylor's my aide up here. I found her about five years ago. I'll tell you a real quick story now. We'll get on down to business. She's from Kansas. First day on the job, we were going to the prison in Gulf County. We were the bridge between Bristol and Bluntstown, you know. And we were going up the bridge, and it was foggy. And I was working, she was driving, and she made some funny noise. And I looked over at her, she just looked real strange. And she said, "Does this bridge go over water?" And I said, "Well, yeah." She said, "I think I'm gonna pass out." I said, "Get it in the middle, just straddle the line there." And coming back, I drove across her. But she's truly been a blessing to me. So she's here to make sure I don't say anything that's not accurate. If you look at committee assignments in the Senate, even though I'm a Democrat and a Republican-controlled Senate, I truly believe if you look at all committee assignments, all 40 senators, I think I've got the best group of committee assignments. I really believe that. I'm chair of the Environment and Natural Resources Committee, which is a pretty good committee to have. Vice chair of Education on Agriculture, Appropriations Subcommittee on Education. I'm on the Rules Committee, and then a joint legislative auditing committee. So that's where I am for the next 2 years. So let me jump right in. Let's talk about rural counties for just a moment. Rural counties, before the hurricane, they were in a crisis throughout the state. If you remember, the State Chamber of Commerce did an exhaustive study, and the results came out a few months ago that said in the 30-something rural counties in this state have fewer jobs today than they did 5 years ago. And let that soak in. Fewer jobs today than they did 5 years ago. Some of us have been saying to the previous governor and others, hey, we appreciate you bringing the job, but they're not coming to North Florida. So we've got to do something for rural Florida. It doesn't matter if it's infrastructure, if it's health care, if it's education, it really doesn't matter. So what's the problem? I'm not sure it's a problem, but the fact is, if you look at the taxing basis for these districts, they're hurting. One mill in Liberty County raises $175,000. One mill in Leon raises a little less than $20 million, and Leon is not rich. So if you look at all these rural counties, the millage just doesn't bring in enough money to provide what government services that they need. I'm talking about bare minimum services. It's talking about roads, talking about bridges, and even though the state participates in that, there are a lot of local needs that just cannot be met. Focus on health care just for a moment. If you look at the health care needs in these rural counties, primary care in most of these counties are really, really hurting. Take Calhoun County, for example, the hospital there, Calhoun Liberty Hospital Bridge, the roof blew off the bridge and off the hospital in the hurricane, and so we got in trying to say, okay, you're already in financial difficulty. Let's see why. Because the question is, and some said, let's just close it down. Well, if you close down that hospital, you're really closing down your primary care and your emergency needs. They take in a little less than 1,000 people a month in that little hospital just in the emergency room, 1,000. Most of that is primary care. 80-something% of it is no pay. So when the hurricane came and the bed, there were no income coming, they're just about bankrupt. Thank goodness state stepped in, and we've got enough money going now to at least keep them going to try to preserve that hospital. Okay, and let's go on. Let's talk about the hurricane for a moment. Just showing how many of you have seen it firsthand, just like this. Good. That's good. Then you know what it's like. Pictures and words really cannot describe exactly what the devastation is. It's just horrific. And it's not just Bay County and Mexico Beach. It's inland as well. This storm was a very unique storm. When the National Hurricane, we've been told, we just left a committee, we've been told that when the National Hurricane Service evaluates this storm, they were reclassified as a 5 when it hit, and it was a 4 when it got to Jackson County. That is very, very unusual for a storm. And also, one of the reasons for that is even though you had a 157 mile an hour wind consistently, within that wind, there were other, I forgot what it's called, but anyway, at the Tyndall Air Base, they had wind measured up to 210 miles an hour at Tyndall. So that's why you have such devastation. Now let's look at what the impact will be, not just right now, but for years to come. If you look at the rural counties there, you got 3 main employers. You have school boards, you have prisons. I've got 9 prisons in my district. And you got timber. Now if you saw, and many of you did, you saw the devastation in terms of timber. Timber, that was some of it 100 to 150 years old. Saw timber, which was a valuable piece of product. So all of that's gone. I mean, even the saw timber, because it's broken and stressed, most of it had to be used for pulp. Now, pulp prices went down from $11 a ton to $1 a ton, beginning to creep back up. But how do you rebound from that kind of economic catastrophe, if you will? You got cotton, soybeans, all of that was wiped out as well. The good thing about that is you can get insurance on cotton and peanuts and soybeans. You can't get insurance on timber. Not only that, when you replant the cotton, peanuts, and so on, you can get your crop back up hopefully within a year. It'd be expensive, but you can get it going. Timber industry is different. It's 20 to 25 years before you can ever get any of that investment back. So what happens? We don't know. We just left a meeting an hour ago. What will the state do? What will the federal department do to help us to get back on our feet in terms of timber? Now, if you look at just the timber issue itself, on October the 9th, you had a piece of property that was a tremendous asset. October 11th, 2 days later, it's on the ground and almost worthless. There were some, I had some, I gave away. I said, if you'll just come get it, you can have it. But if you look at it, not only from an economic standpoint, but from a fire structure standpoint as well, there's so much timber on the ground that if a wildfire started, you can't even get the equipment in to fight the fire. We have a tremendous problem on our hands in terms of fire. Thank goodness since the storm, it's been wet. And so that's given us a little bit of time. But somehow, we've got to get in to all this timber. By the way, 85% of the timber loss belong to private individuals. Some said, well, most of it is in the national forest. Only 15% was state or national owned. The rest of it was owned by individuals. So the question then is, how do you go back and replant it? We just told it take about $1,000 an acre, probably, or more, to go in, remove the debris, and prep it for planting. Then you got to pay, of course, to get replanted. And then you got to wait 20, 25 years for a return on your money. So how many people, how many private individuals can afford to do that? And by the way, these counties that were hit has the highest poverty rate as anywhere in this state, highest poverty rate. There were a lot of people who had small stands of timber for their retirement. It was their 401k, if you will. Wake up the next day and it's gone. So can those people afford to replant? The answer to that is no. Then you go, we're talking about timber. Now let's talk about hardwoods, for example. If you look at the Chipola River, for example, the eye of the storm went straight up Chipola River, Alpha, Marion, and so on. There's timber there that's 200 years old or older, hardwood. Hickory, white oak, things, and many of you have seen, you know what I'm talking about, hammocks, flattened, just gone. And so the question is, and I just asked the question, do we have a reforestation plan, if you will, for hammocks and lowlands? The answer to that is no. And we don't know exactly what to do. But also, if you look at the rivers, take the Chipola River, for example, we still have a flooding problem there. If you look at the graph that the Northwest Florida Water Management District shared with you, even though there's a spike when you have a good rain, the hurricane was up here, but rather than going back to normal, it's still high, still flooded because there's so much debris on the ground and in the river, the water can't get out. So the question is, how do you harvest that? How do you get it out? So we've got a tremendous problem on our hand when it comes to the hurricane and how we'll go back. Talk about education just for a moment. You expect me to say that. Let me get that out of the way. The buzzwords and what we've been saying for the last several years, parental choice. Okay? And who can argue with parental choice? I mean, that's, yeah. Unfortunately, sometimes parents may not have access to all the choices. And what do I mean by that? What I believe, we need to pause and let's take a look at what we've done for education the last 10, 12, 15 years. Let's slow down. Let schools catch their breath. Let's see what's out there and what we've done. If you look at choice, take transportation, for example. The state pays about 40% of the cost of transportation, only 40. So, if you look at parents that have a choice, and I believe in parental choice, but I also believe that every parent should have an opportunity for every choice that's out there. Just because they don't have transportation should not limit them to take an opportunity for their children. So what we've got to do is, if we believe in choice, and we do, let's make sure that every choice that's out there are tax dollars well spent. You've read and you've heard many instances where tax dollars were not used as they should have been. it's a money-making issue for a lot of people. We've got to reassess that. We've got to close those loopholes, and we've got to make sure that every child, every parent has an equal opportunity for all the options that are out there. Okay, I've talked fast. Let me see if you got any questions, and we'll get into it. Yes, sir.
Hold on.
Last year, under a booming economy, the base student allocation went up 47 cents. And, you know, most of the money went to school safety. This was under a booming economy. What can we expect for public school classroom money for this next legislature?
Very good question. Let me dig just a little deeper into that. You heard last year that this was a record amount of money going into public education. I think it was $110 per student. Record amount. That is absolutely true. But the other piece of that, and what some people didn't follow up, say that of that $110, $109.53 were already spent. So what happened is, so the school district was left with 47 cents to be able to cover increase in insurance and gas prices and so on and so forth. Where did the other $109.53 go? It went to school safety, and you can't argue with that. I mean, obviously, there was a need there. We need more money in school safety. But the fact is that the school district had the 47 cents to be able to cover the cost. Now, what will happen this year? We don't know. I'm on that subcommittee, and I'm on the appropriation committee as well. And there'll be, we'll be out there asking for more money for public schools. But along with that, I think, again, we need to ensure that every tax dollar that we put into public education, which means charter schools, regular schools, scholarships, we need to ensure that every tax dollar is well spent and accounted for. That's where the rub is. It should be equal footing regardless of where those dollars are spent. They should be held accountable.
Yep.
Rocky has
grab my attention if you have a question. We can bring my attention.
excuse me. The next question is Rocky Beavis.
Hugh.
I didn't think so. First, let me thank Bill. You guys,
Put the microphone close to your mouth.
first, let me thank Bill for rearranging his schedule. Taylor, we got on the phone with Taylor and Bill, and we appreciate it, Bill. Secondly, let me tell everybody, Bill and I used to play a lot of racquetball about 40 years ago.
I still do. I don't know what happened to you.
Sometimes twice a day. He never beat me, guys.
Yeah.
Now, my
Yeah, who believes that? I mean, look at him. Look at me.
sister would beat both of us like a drum. But Bill, I read your fracking bill the other day. I congratulate you. I don't want to make anybody mad, but my daddy would be proud of you. I know you and Daddy had a lot of conversations about
Wiregrass.
water problems in Florida, but I congratulate you on the fracking bill. Where do you think it's going to go?
Thanks for that question. Let's talk just a minute about fracking. I'm not sure if there's that's one of the most sensitive issues that we'll be addressing. I think we've got a pretty good chance of getting it passed this year. We passed it before in the Senate. The governor, to his credit, he has already spoken out on environmental issues. His wife has as well. So I think we've got a good chance of doing that. And I think it's time. And I've said all along that Florida should be the last state to engage in fracking. I mean, it's just, I know that, it produces a lot of oil and gas, but the risk of that is just something that I don't think this state deserves. And my bill is a little different in fracking. What this will do, we as a state will say that this is a threat to groundwater, and that's the biggest issue. And if we can get that done, if we can get that passed, our children and grandchildren can rest easy. Will there be opposition to that? Yes. A senator came to me this morning and said, "Hey, I read your bill. I want to talk to you about it." He said, "Now, I've got the only county and state that really produces a lot of oil and gas." And I said, well, I didn't expect you to vote for it anyway, but come on by. I might be able to convince you of that. But I think we've got a good chance. I think the timing is right. I think people understand more now than they did a couple of years ago about the threat of fracking and other issues. We got another issue we need to talk about, and that's the deep well injections. There's a school of thought, and it's been done already, to take all your contaminated water, forget fracking, but other water, and inject it far below the aquifer. And so it'll be stored down there. That makes me nervous. It just makes me nervous. We'll be taking a look at that in the committee that I chair.
This is back to schools.
Yep.
And I know a few years ago, there was a law that allowed students to cross county lines to enroll in schools. And Leon County now has a lot of children from surrounding counties in our school district. I'm concerned that Leon County is going to become the school district for these surrounding counties. Is there any, do you want to comment on that, Bill, and if it needs changing?
Well, a lot of people don't realize that you can go to school anywhere you want to in Florida. I mean, you can live here and go to school in Miami, but of course that doesn't make sense because unless you got a Learjet. But that's the law. So how is it working out? Well, one of the first things that popped up, was the superintendent from St. Johns County called me, which is the highest performing school district in Florida. And they have, part of that St. Johns County is Ponte Vedra, okay? Now, if y'all know Ponte Vedra, it's not like lunchtime, okay? Ponte Vedra, they don't depend on timber, they've got other ways. But Ponte Vedra taxed themselves an additional tax for schools. And they're going to build new schools, state-of-the-art schools, and so on and so forth, and they were on it. So the superintendent said he had a group coming from Ponte Vedra and said, now hold on just a minute. We're paying all these high taxes, and we're going to be taking students from Duval County over here, and they don't bring the money with them. In other words, whatever taxes stay involved, so we're going to be educating children that we're paying taxes for. Is that the way this works? And he said, yes. And he said, well, what are you going to do about it? He said, I'm going to call my senator. So he called me. And I said, well, you better talk to the Republican leadership, let's I was kidding around with him. But here's the way it works. On a local basis, you can cap the school, if you will. You give preference to those children who live in that area. So the results of that bill, even though it sounds, you can go anywhere you want to kind of thing, but the fact is that most of the schools where you would want, some children may want their children, they're capped. And they just, so there's no room in the end. But, it's well, you go far, well, I don't want to get off on that. Give me another question.
Right there.
Senator, I see they finally moved you up to the 4th floor. You got a big broad view across the Capitol. How about that?
Senator.
Your 4th floor, you're on the 4th floor now.
Yeah.
Yeah, you moved upstairs. I like that. Question for you. You're in natural resources. How much of the water problem in Florida, and for that matter, the timber and other issues, how much of that would you place at the feet of Army Corps? And what do you think can be done by Army Corps slowing up restoration, all sorts of activities in the state?
If you didn't know, I don't know if y'all could hear his question. He will know how I got to be so smart so quick. The latter part of that question was about Army Corps engineers. We know that sometimes working with the federal government takes a lot of time. And I mean, we're still waiting on money from Hurricane Irma to get back from FEMA. But the Army Corps engineers is, if you look at Lake Okeechobee, if you look at the Apalachicola River, we have issues with that. Somehow we've got to speed that up. And Congressman Dunn, I think will, he's well aware of that, and I know there's a burr under his saddle. So I'm hoping that, and I'm confident he'll be loud, he'll have a loud, clear voice to change that. Okay.
Hello, Senator. How are you doing? Somebody else saying?
Where are you?
I'm right here.
Oh,
Michelle.
I thought I recognized that voice.
As I've been sitting here, Senator Brett Evers' spirit sort of floated around, and he was suggesting to me hemp as a solution to what's going on in Northwest Florida. Because I think if he was here, that's what he would be talking about. We looked at hemp when I was on Ag Natural Resources as a ranking member to supplant when we had citrus greening, to maybe supplant that crop or at least add some. And now with pine, can we add hemp to the mix? Because it, when it gets flattened, it'll grow back up, and you don't have to wait 20 or 30 years. You can wait 2, 3, 4 months. So, in Greg Evers' spirit, answer that question.
The issue of hemp, many of us feel a whole lot more comfortable with hemp than we did just a few years ago. In fact, you can make ropes, you can make pants out of it. We accuse people of trying to tear off the bottom of the pants and smoke it. Eddie Boone back there, he'd put you in jail. But I think if you look at hemp, there's a tremendous possibility there, not just for North Florida, but for all of Florida. And I had a bill last year that passed, and it gave University of Florida, Florida A&M, the lead on that, if you will, to go ahead and do some research on it. You'd be surprised at the number of small landowners who have called, especially since a hurricane, had said, can we get into the hemp business? And so there's a tremendous amount of interest in that. So I think 10 years from now, I think we'll be real surprised how far we've gone in terms of production of hemp and the uses of that. It's going to be a good money crop for a lot of people. I hope that we don't get bogged down with that like we have with medical marijuana. And so far we've been able to steer away from that controversy. So I think the future of hemp is really, really good, positive.
Question back here.
Bill Marshall. How much help are you getting from the federal government in relation to clearing roads and getting Mexico Beach back on a go-forward basis? And are there some federal loans and whatnot to help these farmers and these timber people so they at least clear roads on their properties and get something so that if we do have a dry fall, that we're ready to go?
Good question. We're getting some help from the federal government, more than we anticipated, quite frankly. But I think that was more the people just saw the need. It was a life and death issue a lot of times for people. The governor, of course, called out the National Guard. They were there. I got a call from the sheriff from Bluntstown, and he said, "Hey, we got the National Guard people over here, and they're clearing your state highway. I need some help getting people out of the woods. Can I use them?" And I said, "Yes, take them. And then we'll worry about that later." And it was that kind of attitude. So I called the state and I said, "Look, if the sheriff over there is taking some National Guard now, they're going to take equipment to get down some roads to get people out, because it was a matter of life and death." And I said, "So if anybody gets in trouble, call me, not the sheriff." And everybody said that's fine. And so I think what has come out, the good thing about this hurricane is the response that we have received in North Florida from all over the state. There's a tremendous outpouring of assistance and help, and that's worked. The state's forestry department, all of them they've just gone way out of their lane, if you will, to be of help. There are still areas, though, that we've got to clear roads, and I'll go back to the forest fire issue. If we don't get those, if we don't have access to that, they simply won't be able to stop that fire. There is, I got it there, I forgot. There's 71.93 million tons, 71 million tons of debris on the ground. Now think about that for a minute. Let's talk about debris just for a second. Give you an idea about this storm. There was 1.7 million cubic yards of debris picked up from Irma. 1.7 million cubic yards. There was 27 million cubic yards already picked up from Bay County alone. Now think about that. And another statistic they gave us was, if you take all of the storms combined in the last 12 years, all of the debris is less than what's already been picked up in these counties west of us. And they're just making a dent in it. Let me tell you why. If you went over week after the storm on the road, you saw all the limbs and the logs and all, and they were picking them up. If you go over there now, what you see are huge stumps, trees that were 100, 200 years old, huge. They're just now getting them out, okay, and putting them on the road. So the debris issue is just, it's projected that it will cost $1 billion just for debris. $1 billion just for debris. This part of Florida is different, and y'all know that. Okay? It's hard sometimes for my colleague from Central South Florida to comprehend the difference. It's different.
That's the last question. We have, as a tradition in NEBA, we have this memorable NEBA Cup. And as you move to your mayor's job in Bluntstown, we want you to follow the lead of Governor Scott, who moved to the Senate in Washington, D.C., and prominently display it on your desk.
I will. I sure will. Well, and by the way, thank you all for. I do enjoy coming here. It gets me out of the office. It's just fun to see, especially when I see some of you that has aged. Some of you guys that have aged so much. Some of us don't show our age. Okay? You and Rock, you're in trouble.
You're right. Let's give him a big hand.